Thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing this.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
I figure we could just jump right in. So
Good.
What is your background, Doctor? I don't know exactly. I've read a few of your articles. I have to admit, I just came across you for the first time 2 days ago, and I was very interested in the article I read, which led me to reading more articles you posted. And
good.
But what exactly is your professional background?
Well, I'm a local guy. I was born in Bayside and grew up in Massapequa Park. I've been at school in New York. I got my PhD at Stony Brook University in psychology. I've always been interested in sports. I was a good golfer in college, played on the team, #1 guy, and soon enough converted my practice into sports psychology. So I'm a psychoanalyst. I went on more training as a psychoanalyst, not just behavior modifier. And in conjunction with that, I've got very involved with the media, and I've been writing for a good 30 years now in terms of publications for the lay public and for professionals in Asia and America and in Europe. So I'm a writer, a journalist, and I'm a psychoanalyst. And that's basically what I do.
Okay. And so you've been writing a lot about coronavirus. Obviously, it's the only thing we've been talking about for the last 3 or 4 months. I don't remember how long it is now. And you've been writing it from the perspective of somebody you're analyzing the psychological effects and basically.
Correct.
So you want to get into that? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. My initial thought was when it first hit that the culture was manifesting a lot of anxiety, fear, a sense of weakness, as if no one had an immune system that's been developed over the last 50,000 years in human beings, right? We have an immune system that works. What does that mean? That means if you exercise properly, if you sleep well, if you eat well, if you get some sunshine, you're very strong. Human beings are very strong. We're constantly bombarded with germs all the time. We do not live in a sterile environment. We never have, we never will. We don't have to. So my position initially was this is a really exaggerated, kind of a paranoid response. And there's plenty of proof that there's rampant paranoia in America. Paranoia means someone who feels irrational, very weak, very angry, very stressed, very hopeless. And the paranoid position really, in my mind, came out very, very clearly. And you're right, this has been something that writers have been dealing with for about 11 weeks now. And that's very, very unusual for journalists. Legs in a story doesn't exist anymore. Usually a story will disappear literally within 3 days, no matter how big the story is. This has lasted 3 months. So this is very unusual. And I'm very attuned to it as a writer. I've been writing for 30 years. And so I know about stories that have interest and how you lose interest very quickly, how the culture loses interest. This is not the case right now. So we have a very unusual thing. What I've also noticed, what I've experienced, I'm really shocked at the ability of the film industry to really predict. And I've always felt, the artificial intelligence films or the pandemic films, and the global warming films, these are kind of nonsensical. But clearly, in this case, I really changed my attitude. That Contagion was a movie that really is exactly like what we're going through right now. And so I did some research on who made Contagion, and you find out very quickly that the filmmakers are really hiring in experts. So these things really were predicted many, many years ago. Contagion was made, I forget when, 2011, 2009, something like that. So that was really kind of a hair-raising experience for me to see that. So that's something I wrote about. I wrote about COVID personality. What does that mean? I think it is true. What we're experiencing now is a real trauma for the country. And so COVID personality is something that's going to manifest. It's like post-traumatic stress, hypervigilant people, anxious people, and avoidant people, which takes us right into what your mandate is. How do we get back? It's something else I'll be frank about. I've known Donald Trump. I've always liked him. I'm a golf writer, so our paths have crossed a number of times. But when he became president, I really felt kind of shocked about things and really bought into CNN, MSNBC, and the kind of the outrage from that side, right? But the moment he opened his mouth, this is a true story, about COVID, I said to myself, this is the only sane man in America. He's the only one who's making any sense. And that amazingly, I really switched my attitude towards him. And now I'm very comfortable talking about it, right? That he is making some sense. He's saying, hey, folks, calm down. Let's get back to work. And just like you said in one of your talks, we don't want to go back to the new normal. We don't want to go to the new normal. We want to go back to the regular normal. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Although such anxiety that we're experiencing now, and now it's flipped into something even more bizarre, which is rioting in the streets. Now, my feeling about that, and I've written about that recently, is it comes from a number of different places. One, we have a culture that's humans have been doing civilized things for 6,000 years. What does it mean to do civilized things? It means to sublimate your sexual drive and your aggressive drive into sports, into art, into things like that. For 3 months, the entire world had taken those sublimations away from us. So this is not good news for human beings. And everyone knows that on some level. What are we doing? How does it feel not to be able to shop, not to be able to play golf, et cetera, et cetera? That's very problematic. And so I talked about that recently, wrote about that in terms of sublimations, how important they are. And now we're seeing, though, not only the acting out of frustrations on a general level, you're seeing the racial stuff that's developing. And I think essentially you're also seeing the basic issue in the culture for the last 30, 35 years is income inequality, income frustration. And I think that's really what I'm hearing from a number of my patients, the younger ones. I get to know these people very well, and some of them brighter ones that are young, still going to school. They're kind of saying, they're very like, what's going to happen next, and what's my future going to be like, and what's going on? So they know that they unless you're the top 1%, you got a problem. There's such pressure to compete because that's just the way it is. So you have this is a very difficult, discontented kind of society, a highly stressed society. And I think in some way, for the last 3 months, people have desperately wanted to stop and rest. So I think on some level, that's exactly what's happened. I've seen it in my patients. They're no longer terribly psychosomatic. These are some of these very high-level professionals, but so they want to get back to the stuff. But they're also, I can see that there's also they've been given a little bit of a rest for a while. Which is one thing. We needed it for 30 years, 40 years. This has been an overworked, overspent society. So I have all those things, and that's what I've been writing about, basically.
Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. I mean, I love the take that you're having on all of it. Here's kind of a big question. So, coronavirus, it's a black swan event. Why did we react the way we did? Why didn't it bring us together? Why did it have the opposite effect of bringing it, tearing us apart? Couldn't we have all kind of agreed,
it's a very strange thing, right? What I noticed when it first hit March 15th or so, when it really became evident, right? I politically, I saw one thing happen. I saw for about 3 days, both sides of the aisle, all the channels were basically aligned with President Trump. Everyone was worried. There was a sense of connection and anxiety, and there was a pulling together, and as you always have with a grave trauma, right? But then I was literally shocked within 3 days, maybe 3.5 days, when you watch television, it began to get politicized. Once again, there was crazy questions from the left to President Trump, where I felt he found his pace and his stature, and then all of a sudden, again, it was this obviously political kind of questioning. And I said, and that's it. So we're back to square one. We're not pulled together. I think part of the reason people are not pulled together, maybe this is the most important reason, is for 3 months we've been back into home, into the electronic media, and not really visually and not connected as human beings. So every morning I take a walk around my neighborhood. Right? It's beautiful in the morning now. And I have two reactions. First, I'm walking along and I listen to the birds. That's very beautiful. And I see a human being in the distance. And I immediately get, oh, this is problematic. And who is this person? Blah, blah, blah. Then I get closer and they will say to me, or I will say to them something like good morning, like a human connection, right? And it immediately changes. Everything feels different. Like I like that person. That person likes me. So there's a humanity that's one of the big issues now. We're in a world now of electronics. This is all changing. So cyborg experience is now very common in cars and on Skype, and everything is getting more and more distant. This is a big problem. It's a big problem for connectedness and humanity. And so that's, I know one of your concerns is how do you pull people together? It is about the human touch. What does a politician do? But they're human. They're very friendly people. People like them immediately. They like people, right? And so that's the thing that's needed. But you have this other onslaught of electronics, social distancing on every level. And that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, and it shocked me with the George Floyd thing as well, because anybody who saw that video, 99.9% of people, any reasonable person that saw that reacted in the same way. Oh my God, I can't believe what I just witnessed the murder of somebody, a police officer essentially murdering somebody. And that was a horrible thing. And everybody seems to agree on that, yet there is protesting turning into rioting when so many of us essentially agree that it was a horrible thing and things need to change. So once again, it kind of baffles me a little bit as to why something like that didn't kind of bring us together. Instead, it tore us apart.
Right. Well, that's interesting. The idea, like you're saying, when a trauma occurs, you expect the mutual connection, a mutual sharing, a rallying together. This, I think, is more complicated than a virus trauma. This is a human kind of a history, right, of racial discrimination. So you have that, but I also think that that's really not the point of any of the riots. I think that that's a match, that the underlying questions have been very, very evident for 30, 40 years in America. This unrest, this feeling unhappy, overworked, I'm not making enough money. What happened to my salary? This is not a joke. This is serious stuff that's underneath. I thought in 2008, when there was the global economic collapse, and I started writing about the one percenters, et cetera, I really felt for a good 6 months that there would be a shifting. Something will happen that will rectify this. And I had written about it before the collapse. I wrote about it for a couple of years, and I was like criticized by economists. What are you talking about? But when it hit, I said, now something will change. But of course, nothing changed. Nothing changed. It is what it is, right? The economy is what it is. The social class system is getting more separated for any number of reasons. So it's I think that's the underlying explosion here that we're seeing, and we're seeing a big explosion.
Yeah. So I mean, a big part of my message. Well, number one, it's build a brighter future together, and I had that tagline when I first decided to run. This is before coronavirus broke out. This is before the protests we're seeing with George Floyd. So I feel like it's more important now than ever, and I'm really compelled to try to be that candidate that brings people together. And so, what do you think can be done? I mean, what kind of messaging should I be casting out there? What is the message? How do we find commonality? How do we start to bring people together during these times?
Well, I think very, very difficult. I think that the charisma of a good politician is automatically occurs. Like Bill Clinton was that way. When you met Clinton, you loved him. Hillary, not so much, but there's certain, when you met Reagan, you loved him, right? When you meet Obama, you love him. So that magical quality of a human people, someone that loves others and the others automatically love him. That's I think the magic of a good politician. Now, how that's articulated in words and messaging, that's not clear to me. That's not my expertise, really. I mean, I've written a lot about these kind of things in terms of, like, when Obama came in, he wanted to help, and he knew he was at the crisis of 2008, and so he started talking about having restraint as a message, right? You don't want to overspend, and of course, he was advised right away, don't say that again. That's what got Carter thrown out of office, essentially, when he said, the malaise speech, and don't spend so much, and we're too spoiled. You can't do that. So that's a messaging that was like a kind of a strange messaging that's inevitable. You'd want to say something like that, but it didn't work. How I think basically that the message is, and if you have the ability to with humanity, pull people together with the dialogue, with the face-to-face dialogue, right? Like, what is a politician? A handshaker, someone who sees the people, right? I still remember the only time I met Bobby Kennedy. Well, I was a kid, and I still remember he shook my hand. It was like a shocking thing. Like, whoa, this is special. So I think the magic of a good politician is someone who has a lot of love and can connect. How it relates to messaging, I don't know. I think we're up against it. I think that it's too much information. You need simplicity. Simplicity has created divisiveness, red, blue. That's problematic. I think that the idea of the electronics and the cyborg kind of experience is problematic for a politician who wants to pull people together, unify people, have them to have a dialogue. I mean, dialogue is unheard of for the last 25 years. There's no dialogue. You may have read some of the stuff I wrote about that. How do the nature of over information is such that it confuses the mind. We cannot handle it. And so you have to go simple. And with that simplicity, what's happened politically is a kind of a divisive simplicity. You're red, you're blue. That's it, right? You're conservative, you're liberal. So there's it's a simple-minded, but it's an inevitable outcome of too much information. Now, how you address that is really beyond me. I mean, yeah. I don't know.
I think a big part of what my message is becoming is, we as a people need to overcome this division that's being created by the media and by certain political groups, and not allow them to manipulate us. And I feel like we're being used as people. We're being divided and pitted against each other for other people's benefit. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you look at Nassau County, I go one-on-one with any door I knock on. Everybody wants to get back to normal, some semblance of normal. They agree to that. Everybody wants at the end of the night to go home to their family. They want to, they don't want to wake up in the morning and read on the news how, people were rioting down the block. They don't want fear of, to fear whether or not they could go outside because they're going to get a virus. So it's like we agree on so much, but yet we've been divided. And I think it's really because the media and people who stand to benefit from dividing us. So that's part of my message, is trying to get that out to people who realize, hey, don't let them do that to us. And let's talk one-on-one and agree that this is what we want as a community, and we don't need to be manipulated by these other forces.
Well, I think it's an interesting point. I think everyone I've spoken to, every one of my patients, all the way through knew that this was an exaggerated response. Everyone knew it. Everyone. You look at the numbers. Wow, the kill rate is not that grave. It's the way it is, right? So everyone knew it, but what really happened? And I think you're right. I don't know about the powers that be that have a vested interest, but it's clear to me that the media is driven by the need for eyes. And Marshall McLuhan was one of the great thinkers, right, of the 70s, really a genius of a guy, right? And he was the first guy to really wrote about media and what it means, what it's about. And you've heard many of the phrases about, the medium is a message. He always talked about media as a cold medium. It's cold. The screen is cold. It's dead, which in fact it is dead. So what does that mean? That means you got to juice it up. What does it mean to juice it up? You better come up with some fun, interesting, dynamic, scary as hell stories to keep the eyes on it. And that's exactly what's happening. They don't have a choice in the matter. If you want to have people watch you, you better be exciting. You better talk about blood and guts, and you better be divisive with the other guy. And of course that's what it is now. The media, right? It's either liberal or conservative. It's a strange thing, but it's inherent in the problem of media. It's a dead medium, so you have to have juice. And there's so much money involved, right? You can't fool around with this. There's a lot of money involved with all this stuff. So that may be what you're referring to as the powers that be, but it's inherent in the technology itself. It's a dead technology, so you need juice, you need excitement. And what that means here, wow, look at this, the virus. First we had the impeachment, right? That was a nightmare. Now we had the COVID. That's a nightmare. Now we're flipping it into, now we have riots in the streets. It's all good. It's all good news. It's all excitement. Who the hell doesn't tune in? This is great stuff. It's like watching a war. Like, wow, that's pretty exciting. The last time I was addicted to TV this way was during the Iraq War. Oh, every night I got to tape it. Like, Jesus. And that's media. And that's probably the biggest force there is now in the world is the media, So
do you think we get back to normal sometime soon? Is it human nature that we're just we'll bounce back to, the median?
I think yes. I think most likely yes, right? That people, one of my patients, I work with professional golfers, and one of the wives said to me, but she met 2 months ago, she said, we're all, what did she say, stress weary or fear weary? And she's right. She's very smart. You get sick of this stuff eventually, right? And so you say, okay. And I do think so. I think it's going to be a big challenge because there's another element in the story that's a real mess, which is the legal element, right? I think the legality drives the whole shutdown. You know what happened with the NBA. There were lawyers involved with this. Okay, let's add this up. If we're liable for how many lawsuits if 50 people get sick? Hey, let's shut it down. And that was a snowball effect. So there was a legal element to this mess, right? And so it's still here. I went to my podiatrist yesterday. It was ridiculous. First, you got to call up. You're outside and I can't get through. And then the woman sees me and, she calls me up and she has 20 questions, such as, have you left the house in the last 14 days? You're asking me this question before I can get in to see the podiatrist? And so the whole, and then you walk in and there's a medical examiner and the temperature and the oxygen level, and then you sit over here. It's so heinous, this story, right? But it's legally driven, right? Mnuchin said a great thing that now it's disappeared. His first press conference about 2 weeks ago, there will be no litigation based upon this. Let me repeat, and of course the media didn't hear it. There will be no litigation based upon the COVID. That's the most important statement made in the last 3 months. And hopefully that's true. Now, of course, I know lawyers and they say, but there will be litigation, So, I mean, that's another element to this mess, right? And I guess that's the way it is also,
What do you think about the hypocrisy we're seeing where, so I've been going to those reopen rallies. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of that, as I know you are. You came out very early and talking about it in a very rational way. I totally agree with that mindset. And, but it was very controversial to go to those rallies initially. It was a big risk that I had to take. I'm running for Congress, and I felt that risk when I was going out there to do it. I felt like, wow, even my own family was like, Doug, are you sure? Is this, look, are you looking at all the facts here? Look at, we can't leave our homes. I was like, yeah, no, based on what I'm seeing, this is what I think we should be doing. I think we should be, protecting the vulnerable, allowing the resilient and the young to get back to normal. And, the same people that, were there to criticize me and say, how dare you support, or say we should be reopening, are now kind of looking the other way when we have people out there congregating in big groups and protesting, and all of a sudden it no longer seems to matter. From a psychological perspective, like how are people capable of arguing one thing one way and then completely forgetting that argument and contradicting themselves? I mean, what's going on there?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think essentially, yes, there's two issues, right? There's one issue of health and the paranoid feelings about health, and the other is money, economics, right? So you have a huge war here, right? And I started thinking, about a month and a half or so ago, I wrote a little bit about it, but that's the presentation. So, I mean, everyone needs to work. We have to do that to make some money. But everyone wants to stay alive. No one wants to die. Everyone has a massive fear of death, right? And that's another level that I've written about, that people do have tremendous fear of death, and it's unresolved, and it's like lurking underneath. So that's been tapped into. But as that's been tapped into, the fear of death, right, and the way it's been escalated, then you have this other, hey, Jesus, yet not only have boredom, you have depression, you have no money. Well, okay. Oh, I got to survive. Is there risk involved in life? I guess there is. How much risk? I don't know. I mean, it's every session I have is, I just got off the phone with one of my patients, and she's like thinking about bright kid, very super bright high school kid, and going to work in the summer, but the whole thing, well, she's going to work, but in the camp, and then the mask, and then no mask, and then home, and I have to wear a mask all day. Then it's like such a confusing, difficult moment. This is, for everyone.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, I basically like, I don't buy into most of it, really. Not at all, really. I don't. I think it's mostly a paranoid position that's been escalated by the media
but the hypocrisy, though, right? So those same people that were paranoid and said, how dare you go out and say, let's reopen things, are then okay with these large protests. So that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the hypocrisy there.
Yeah, they're saying you're going to be sick as a dog. You better watch it. But now let's go protest.
Yeah. How are people, in their mind, how are they even allowing them to logically make these I'm a big stickler for hypocrisy when I see it. It's like I don't understand how you're rationalizing that. So you're getting very angry when people are going out to protest for reopening the economy, but you're okay with everybody running out on the streets and protesting for something else. So it's just a question. It's just like, because I think that really does come down to human psychology, right? So why people are capable of doing that, and in their own minds are completely fine with, having that dichotomy in their own.
Well, the concept of the liberal side and the conservative side, right? Feeling like, right? There's
but they both are basically kind of arguing for the same thing at the end of the day.
Well, I don't know, but I remember one of the first pieces I published was in Esquire many, many years ago, and I was outraged with Jesse Helms and the fight, trying to get rid of the National Endowment for the Arts, and it was a strange. And I concluded that it looked to me, because he was fighting a liberal that was losing the battle. I forget the guy's name, Claiborne, I forget, but major political guys. And I said, the liberals are kind and they're sweet and they're good-hearted, and the conservatives are like Jesse Helms. They are aggressive, they're tough, and they often win, right? And that's what happened there. I think they decimated the Endowment for the Arts, right? Because Jesse Helms, he got pissed off at some stupid, who was it? I forget an artist who did an interesting thing about, I won't get into the details, but Helms was outraged. You remember years ago, this happened, this kind of thing. So, you have the liberal side. I remember my psychoanalyst said, the liberals are the feminine and the conservatives are the masculine, and that makes some sense, right? And that's the way it is. Okay, makes sense. And so it plays out in whatever ways it's playing out. And of course, the question you're asking is, how does one pull that together? I always felt when I saw Bill Clinton, I said, this is a conservative that's pretending to be a liberal, right? And that's the magic touch, right? Like someone who can combine both a feeling of warmth and compassion and love with strength and power, right? Obama was more liberal than, but of course he was a genius. That's very different. He was so gifted intellectually. It's like, really a miracle he was. But Trump is interesting. Obviously he's a conservative, strong, masculine person, but he's got a genius for messaging, boy. I mean, I pity Biden during the debates because he's got no chance. I mean, when I saw Donald Trump debate Hillary, within 30 seconds, I said, he's won everything. He's won everything. Why? He's simple and he's interesting. And Hillary was obviously gifted, very talented, totally competent, and boring. I said, boring doesn't sell.
And I think people just love the fact that Trump takes action. Whether or not you agree with his action, he takes action. You're so used to government talking and not doing. He does. Right. He takes action.
Yeah, he's quite something. Quite something. I've fluctuated between thinking this is the worst president in history to he may go down as the best president in history. It's like, holy.
only time will tell. So I guess
in terms of when you deal with him personally, he's a generous guy. He's not a joke. He's like, oh, you like him, He's smart as anything and he's generous as anything. So, but that's on a different personal level, and people that don't have access to that, so they don't know really,
Yep. But it's important to get that message out.
Yeah.
So I guess last topic we could talk. One of the things you wrote about was the power to adapt.
Yeah.
So Homo sapiens being the reason why we've been so successful as Homo sapiens is our ability to adapt in our environments.
Yep.
And Americans in particular being good at adapting. So any prediction there on how you see that playing out or playing a role here with what we're seeing going on?
Of course. Every person who has been a naysayer, who's been a doomsday guy, everyone has been false in their predictions. It's never come out true, right? 1965, overpopulation is going to be a total disaster. Unbelievable. We got to stop making kids, this and that. Nothing came true. People want to be negative, and scientists can definitely make an argument. Global warming and this and that is really going to be a big problem. But at the same time, human beings are unbelievably intelligent and creative, and especially Americans, because we're not burdened with like a history of structure, right? And so the genius of any human being is whatever it is, you can adapt very, very quickly. We're very highly intelligent beings, right? We can, and this is exactly the same. We're going to adapt no matter what the media is saying, no matter what legalistic, problematic stuff is going on, no matter what's happening in the streets. Of course, we're very gifted, sentient beings. And the one thing we do more than anything else is figure things out. And then we change things, especially Americans. We're fluid in our thinking and our creativity. We're the greatest in art, greatest in entertainment, and we're the best at adapting. So of course we're gonna adapt. We're already adapting, right? No matter what happens, and that's the way it is. I always say, if they dropped a nuclear bomb in Manhattan, and this is more related to capitalism, if they dropped a nuclear bomb in Manhattan, it wouldn't even touch capitalism. We would still keep going. It's such a powerful ideology, and that's driven by human beings, right? This is how it is. You have to compete. You make things. You win. You lose. This whole thing. So yes, 100% we'll adapt. Human beings will adapt. We're much more intelligent than we think we are.
Yeah, have you read the book *Sapiens*? Have you?
No.
Oh, I highly recommend that. It gets into a little bit of that.
Really?
Basically, but the real power of Homo sapiens being our ability not only to adapt, but our ability as a species to have shared beliefs in abstract concepts. So which is like even things like math and science, religion, just so, the concept of money itself, the fact that we can believe in something that's abstract and believe in it together. So
Really?
capitalism being one of those things.
Really? Sharing,
Yeah.
yeah, sharing a belief system. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you think about, the biggest challenge that you can see it in films over the last 20, 30 years is, of course, artificial intelligence. And of course, MIT people and, people are really worried about this because computers are very soon going to be way more intelligent than we are on every level. But, the other side of this is we will be, like you're saying, the sharing. Teilhard de Chardin is a religious guy that Mcluhan liked, and Mcluhan and also Chardin was talking about what's happening now. Let's say the last 30, 40, 50 years it's called the Noosphere. That, like you're saying about sharing, information is going to be worldwide, which is what's happened, right? And that in this is going to be a tremendous unity eventually, right? How long that takes is not clear, but there'll be a whole global mind and a global mindset. And so I've always feared that we're just going to be another step in evolution, that computers are going to take over. But Mcluhan and Teilhard de Chardin, they said they were much more optimistic about it. And even guys at MIT are more pessimistic and frightened about computer intelligence. And you can pick that up, of course, in the movies, Terminator movies, the whole, wow, they took over and we're dead, but probably not. It's not going to happen that way. We're somehow going to figure that out also,
Yeah, that's the singularity, I think, is essentially what you're talking about there when, right, that shared information, the ability to share information among computers becomes more powerful than humans' ability to share and use that information.
Yeah.
But very interesting things. I'd love to talk to you again, in the future if you'd be willing to come back on.
Of course, we'll stay in touch, and
Yeah.
I'll follow up with some letter to you, and you do the same for me, and it'll be an interesting immediate future. And I wish you the very best of luck in your campaign.
Thank you, sir. And yeah, so like what I'm really focusing on now is trying to bring people together in the congressional 4th district. I've said before, I mean, I think this district, I don't know where do you live? Are you in?
I'm in Old Westbury.
Oh, okay. So you're right out. I think you're right outside my district.
Okay.
So CD4 is basically the town of Hempstead plus, Mineola, New Hyde Park. We go over to Westbury, but not Old Westbury.
Okay.
But I think it's a district that's very diverse when you look at the stats.
Question.
Very diverse district. So my hope is if we can kind of be if we can make it work here, and I think it is working here, but if we continue to make it work here and improve it, it could kind of be a shining example for the country and the world. And now more than ever, I think is a time for us to hopefully kind of showcase that to the world and come together and show that we can get past these things. We can get back to an open and free society where we allow people to rely on their own common sense to interact freely in the world. And that's the initiatives that I'm really pushing as a congressman. And I hope to get there.
And like you're saying, Nassau County is a symbol of the ability to deal with diversity. No question.
100%. Yeah.
It's like, we used to say Queens was that way, but maybe Nassau is a better way to think about that, right? Because there's money, and there's obviously Caucasian influence and Italian and Irish, but there's also tremendous diversity emerging. So yeah, it's interesting. You got a challenge on your hands.
Yes. Which I welcome. I love diversity. I mean, it's really it's why I like Hempstead. I like the town of Hempstead. I think it's a great community to live in because of the diversity, and I think that's what keeps us interesting. Right outside what I believe is the greatest city in the world,
of course.
And let's keep this the greatest suburbs in the world.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. And
my pleasure. Fun talking to you.
I look forward to your next article.
Thank you very much. I'll be talking to you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.